everybody, Mike Deere here with your DRF race of the day for Friday, June 16th. We're going to Belmont Park for the race of the day. Race number 9 is an allowance optional claiming race for fillies and mares. They're going to go 1 mile and a 16th on the main track. Purse $95,000. Here is your field of 10 for the race of the day. You can see there on the morning line, no heavily favored horse on the morning line. Your morning line favorite on David Aragona's line there for this race, number 3, Guns and Graces, 5-2 for trainer Chad Brown. She's going to make her first start in New York since the career debut, where she bumped into a pretty talented stablemate of hers and was beaten a million lengths. And finishing second, she's steadily improved since then. Chad Brown's going to put a pair of blinkers on her here as she comes back to New York, and probably runs in a little bit of an easier race after a couple of graded stakes tries, and then a higher priced allowance optional claimer in a most recent start at Churchill Downs around 2 turns, where she finished 6th at 5-2, the same price she is on the morning line for this race. A couple of other horses towards the outside who could take money in here. It feels like the 7 Sunset Louise, who is now out of New York bred conditions and will step into open company for this for the first time in her career. She comes off of a nice win, though, in her 4-year-old debut with a 79 Beyer speed figure. She's 7-2 on the morning line and is a contender in this race. The horse drawn to the far outside, number 10, Sacred Wish, for trainer George Weaver, is 7-2 on the line as well. This horse is dropping out of a couple of graded stakes starts in her 2 most recent races. Ran well in one of them, not so well in the other. This is obviously a better spot for her. She's very lightly raced for Top Connections and just looks like a major player in this race. Let's start out by looking at the Timeform US pace projector for this race. No pace designation leading to an advantage for either front runners or closers in here. Timeform US projects it to be a fairly run race. The 7, who we mentioned, Sunset Louise, and the 10, Sacred Wish, they are projected to be out front here at the pace call, and that seems fair enough considering their running style. Certainly Sunset Louise did just wire a field in her most recent start. Didn't really have to work that hard to make the front end there, but she got there. Overall, she has pretty good speed. It feels like there's probably still better races to come for her, as is also the case, I think, with the 10 Sunset Wish, or Sacred Wish rather, who just dropping out of some tougher races, and it just feels like those kinds of races, she's probably not fast enough to just make the lead. In this kind of a race, she does have the outside post though, so Johnny Velasquez, who's riding, can just sort of play it off the break there. If she gets away cleanly and nobody else goes, I'm sure they'll be looking for the front. If not, she can just take up a stalking spot on the outside, which isn't a terrible place to be. The horse with the top late pace rating, according to Timeform US, is the 9 Suspended Campaign, and you see there she's last on that pace projector and will need to be closing hard to get close at the end of this race. Let's start out by talking about the horse down on the rail. I'm Buzzy, 20-1 on the morning line. She is 1 of 2 in here. Both she and the number 2, Wishing on a Star, are availing themselves of that $50,000 claiming option and are in for the tag here. I'm Buzzy has blinkers on. She's first off the claim for trainer Chris Engelhardt, and she's going to stretch back out for this race. She's run okay in some longer races in the past. She has won a 2-turn race on the turf. The most recent start going long or longer than a sprint distance on the main track came back in November in an off-turf race at Aqueduct. She ran fine that day. She was only second best with a 68 Beyer speed figure. The most recent win for her came at the end of February, going 6.5 at Aqueduct, and she did run pretty well that day. She came from well out of it, put in a good finish in that race, and just got up to get the job done there and winning that N1X condition, which is why if they want to run her here, she does have to be in for the 50. That was a good performance from her. It should be pointed out, however, that the horse that she just tagged on the line there, Can't Hurry Love, who was a much shorter price, got pretty unlucky there. She's more of a speed type of horse, and she totally blew the start there. Had a lot to overcome and just got nailed by this horse, who did what she had to do to get the job done. She's going to have to take a step forward here off the claim for Chris Engelhardt, though, who's been pretty hot over the last several months. Not a ton of starters, but just about everything he puts out on the track has been running pretty well. We'll see if he can keep that streak going. The number 2 is Wishing on a Star, also in for the $50,000. This is a horse, a filly for trainer Horacio De Paz, who's actually pretty good. Started out her career mostly concentrating on turf and was sort of okay on that surface. I think it's pretty clear, though, just based on what she's been doing lately, she's probably a better horse on the main track. Her last 3 starts, De Paz claimed this horse out of a maiden win for $20,000 back at the beginning of March going a mile. She looked really good, just won that race super easily. 3 starts for these new connections, all pretty good performances. Did not get a great trip for these connections. First time off the claim when they cut her back to 7. Came back, stretched all the way out to 9 furlongs at her next start, and just got really super ranked in that race. And I think it really cost her at the end. She wound up finishing second in there, but didn't run poorly at all. Most recently, got her back to the 1-turn mile. It's a muddy sealed track. Here's the replay for that race right now. This is a good performance from Wishing on the Star. They just sat wide with her, just slightly off the pace up the backstretch, stayed 4 wide all the way around the turn, and you can see here through the stretch, she's going to come with a really game finisher. She's going to overpower this horse on the lead. They're well clear of the rest of that field, and this horse is just going to get away at the end to win by 4 lengths. New Buyer top of 74. This is a good performance. She will have to improve again to beat this field, which is tougher than the one that we just saw her beating there in that replay. But this filly's pretty good. She's still got some upside. She's going to be a price in this race. I think it's not going to be easy for her to win here, but I could certainly use this horse at the right price. I think she's headed the right way. Really like her recent form, especially for these connections. The 3, your morning line favorite, Guns and Graces for Chad Brown. Irad Ortiz has the mount. Another horse who will add blinkers for this. And we'll see if it maybe brings a little bit more speed into her game here. She didn't start out as a slow horse in her 2 starts as a 2-year-old last year, both of them going a mile or longer. She wasn't ever that far away from the pace in those races. Again, just blown out by her stablemate in her debut. Went down to Tampa to break her maiden around 2 turns. Got a great trip in that race, but also pulled clear at the end. Went to a wrong lead right at the as that field came down to the wire there. But she won that race pretty easily. After that, when they came back off the layoff this year, it was 2 graded stakes races, which I guess you would just have to say are a little too tough for her. The Devona Dale down at Gulfstream Park, a 1-turn mile, she did put in a nice late run in that race. So I don't want to take too much away from her. She was a pretty big price in there. Obviously, the winner of that race, Darth Vader, has actually turned out to be pretty good. I think she was like 46-1 in that race, but she's actually turned out to be a really good horse. Guns and Graces got way too far away early in there. Did make a nice late run through the stretch there to get up for second, although she was never a real threat to the winner. They tried the Ashland after that, a grade 1. Once again, she ran fine. She was well off the pace in that race and was never a real threat. She did get along for 4th there at the end. They went back to the allowance optional claimer last time at Churchill Downs. It's a 2-turn race. She was once again, well off the pace in there. Didn't really gain any ground around the 2nd turn. Sort of stayed on through this. I thought her trip was good enough overall. She was never, again, a real threat in there. She did gain some ground at the end, wound up finishing 6th, but she was never a real threat in there. I don't know. I like the way that she's steadily progressed in all of her starts so far. I do think this is a really good spot for her. It's just your call whether you want to take a short price on her. I do think she could get closer to the pace in here, and it could make a difference. Obviously, it'd be far from shocking if she won here. I just don't know how short a price I'd want to take on her because I don't ultimately know how good she actually is. Swoop to the finish is the 4, 10-1 on the morning line. This is going to be her dirt debut. It's also going to be her first start for trainer Bill Mott. This is a horse that went through the Samson Farm dispersal. They paid $110,000 for her. These connections did in November, and they're going to bring her back off the layoff here and let her try dirt for the first time in her career. We'll see how it all works out. I remember her breaking her maiden on turf at Woodbine last summer. I thought she looked pretty good winning that race. She did get a really good trip in that spot, but it was a good performance. A couple of starts later, she was back on turf and she finished a decent second in a stakes race up there at Woodbine, going 1.25 miles. Her most recent start was not a good one. End of October, also on the grass there at Woodbine. She was up close to the pace. It was kind of a closer's race there. I just didn't really feel like she had some kind of impossible trip there. I thought she was up close. I thought she had a good trip in there. She was on a clear lead at the top of the stretch, and she just didn't really finish at all. What she does on dirt here, it remains to be seen. She doesn't have a huge pedigree to suggest she'll be better on the dirt, but it's certainly possible that she handles it and runs a competitive race. It's also worth putting out that she has some speed. So if she does handle the main track, she could be forward in this race. Just Catherine's the 5. She'll probably be a fair price in here. Her most recent start, right off the maiden win, they stretched her out for the first time in that Gulfstream Park Oaks, which Sacred Wish, the morning line favorite the horse on the outside is the second choice on the line, was also in. This horse just didn't show up in there. Just sort of looked like she was overmatched. Saved ground all the way around the track at the back of the pack and finished last. Prior to that, I thought her form was actually pretty good. She ran okay in her first career start. She just came up short in her second start. These are both 6-furlong races, but she ran pretty well both times. Went to 7 for her third career start and broke her maiden very easily. She still has not run a fast race yet, and she's going to have to prove that she can handle a little bit more distance here. If nothing else, they're running her in the right race here. I do think she has some talent. I don't think she's impossible in this race, and she's going to be a pretty big price, I think. The 6 is Amity Island. She's 50-1 on the morning line. She's had a lot of chances, 2 for 22 in her career to this point. Hasn't really been competitive. These connections claimed her back at the end of January for 14,000. Came close 4 starts back going a mile at Aqueduct. Just failed to catch Buston Bay, who's also back in here. She was a big price that day. She'll be a big price again. I thought she was hard to make a case for in here. Sunset Louise is the 7. She's a major player in this race. Took a huge step forward to win her second career start back early last year as a 3-year-old. Just didn't really do that much running first time out. Sprinting, and her rider didn't really abuse her in that race. Second start, she looked like a totally different horse and actually overcame trouble at a couple of different points to win, and to win really easily. She didn't run again after that for about 6 months. And when she came back, bumped and studied away from the gate there, looked like she was going to run, and then just sort of kind of came up empty in there, didn't run that well. But since then, once again, she's just turned everything around. A nice allowance win at Saratoga going the mile out of the new chute there. A really good second in her next start. They tried the Empire Distaff. It didn't work out. Off to layoff in her most recent start. Here's the replay. It's a muddy sealed track. This is the same day of the other replay that we just watched earlier where Wishing on a Star won. It's the same day. It's about a race later. And Sunset Louise just got right to the front in here. And you can see she's in charge of this race as they come into the stretch, and she just easily keeps clear in her. She's much the best in this race. That's Buston Bay, who's also in here, who's going to finish second to her. Really nice performance, nice return from the layoff as well. She's still lightly raced. She has forward to go. She has speed, but she does not need the lead. This will be her first start out of New York bred company, but I think she's pretty good, and I think she could get the right trip in this race. I think she's a contender in here. We'll see what kind of price she is. The 8 is Buston Bay, 6-1 on the line. She's been in a couple of the race of the days that Dan Illman and I have done recently. My position on her for those races and my position on her remains. I just think she's a little bit better going shorter than this. Obviously, she's proved me wrong in 2 of her last 3 starts. She won at a mile 3 starts back, although she was pretty desperate to hold on there with only a 69 buyer, and that the aforementioned Amity Island, who was a huge price, almost got there at the end. Came back at her next start. The race we just watched there, Sunset Louise wired her. She was only second best there. Here's her most recent start. Listen, she wins this race really easily. She's the favorite in here. It's a mile and a 16th, this exact distance on this track. She made her way to the early lead in there, and there's just not a lot of running going on behind her. 80 buyer speed figure though, it's very close to her career top. She's obviously in good form right now for Linda Rice, who just sends out nothing but live horses these days. I don't feel like I want to knock her anymore. She's going to be a fair price in this race. You know, a couple of those recent wins where she was the favorite, I was happy to bet against her, and she made me pay for it. I'll bet against her here, but I wouldn't argue too hard with anybody who likes her. She is in good form, and she's going to be a better price this time. The number 9 is Suspended Campaign. She's going to be way back off the pace in here early. She's actually not bad. She just has a terrible running style, and one that sort of makes it hard for her to win races. But she's hit the board, now in 5 of her last 6 starts. There's a win in there. That was against 32 claimers. She's been, trying this non-winner 1 condition for a while here. She can't really get through it, but she's making some money. She's always running at the end of her races. She usually leaves herself with a little bit too much to do. She's going to drop back around 1 turn here. Her last 2 races, 2 turns and 9 furlongs, and she ran fine in those races. She's a horse who could be along for a piece here. I wouldn't use her on top unless she was some kind of huge price. Sacred Wish, the number 10, is the final horse in the field there. Again, dropping out of 2 graded races. Actually ran, I thought, really well in that Gulfstream Park Oaks 2 starts back. With the first time for these connections, the first time beyond 6 furlongs in her life, she was second best that day. But man, did she get caught wide around the first turn, still wide up the backstretch. Tried to move closer around the second turn, but she was still 4 wide. All in all, I thought she did really well to get second that day with the 78 buyer. They tried her in the Black Eyed Susan last time. It was a tougher race. She just never really could get into contention there and wound up getting really tired through the stretch and finished far back. I guess you don't want to take that, hold that race against her too much. It does give her a trouble comment there taken up. I don't know. She did study a little bit early on in there, but after that, the trip was fine. She was just overmatched in that race. This is a way better spot. She's going to take money in here. She's one of the horses to beat in this race. And I wasn't really wildly against her in here, but as we put the picks up there for this race, Listen, the two favorites in here, the three Guns and Graces, who is the morning line favorite, the 10 Sacred Wish, I won't be surprised when they won 1-2 in here. But I like Sunset Louise as a horse. I think she will wind up being a fair price in here, and I think she can get the right kind of trip in this race. So I put her on top. I went 7, 10, 3, and 2. In Friday's race of the day, it's a pretty good one. I don't think the favorites have to win in this race. It's race number 9 at Belmont Park on Friday. The approximate post time is 5:19 Eastern Time. Good luck.